impromptu stream on solutions to problems. Okay. Free Palestine is just a small subset, but yet it's a critical piece to freeing the world. Now that we know part of the problem, the problem is quite huge, and it's quite complex, because we're not just talking about Zionist Jews when we speak about the problem. We are talking about Zionists in general. And just because you see opposing sides of an equation doesn't mean that they're not fueled by the same source. So we can kind of lump Kabbalists, Freemasonry, Illuminati, the selfish elite, all together in one lump. Anti-Semites, etc. We can lump them all into one lump. The way how they run this world, the way how they effect influence on this world involves our complicity in it. And our feeling that they're too big, they're too strong, and we are hopeless. They need us to feel powerless. So what the truth of the matter is, the most powerful group of people in the world isn't these elitists who are selfish. Though they are well organized, it is the masses. The reason we are so powerful is because of our sheer numbers. The disadvantage that the ruling, selfish elite have in this world is that they're incredibly outnumbered by the rest of the world. Now, there's one more piece of information I need to give you guys, lest you put your confidence in man in any way, shape, or form. But before I do this, I'm going to begin by using what Sickness has here. And I want you guys to listen to Donald Trump and what he says. Now, Donald Trump came out and he said that we got into wars we shouldn't have gotten into. Iraq was a bad war. It was based on misinformation, supposedly intelligence. He didn't connect the dots that the intelligence was based on Mr. Netanyahu getting us into that war. But anyway, let us begin.
You have between AOC and Omar and these people that hate Israel. You know, the biggest change I've seen in Congress is Israel literally owned Congress. You understand that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And it was so powerful. It was so powerful. And today it's almost the opposite. You have between AOC and Omar and these people that hate Israel. They hate it with a passion. They're controlling Congress, and Israel is not a force in Congress anymore. It's just amazing. I've never seen such a change. And we're not talking about over a very long period of time.
Okay. Now, what Mr. Trump's statement made here, that he's so amazed about that, and this is the same Donald Trump that's talking about us going into wars we shouldn't even have gone into, not understanding that this is the same lobby, this is the same group, AIPAC and a company, who caused us to go into there. But let's say, there's a couple of things you guys got to understand. Let's say AIPAC is disassembled. Let's say we get rid of AIPAC, right? It's registered as a foreign body, lobbying body, whatever. You think things are going to change just before we get rid of, let's say we get rid of all the lobbies. You get an AIPAC, you get rid of all the other Israeli lobbies out there. Get rid of them. Do you think that changes anything? Let's say we get rid of the nation of Israel, Palestine is free, they're united and everything. You think that that stops everything and everything goes back to normal? No. These powerful Zionist. And let me just say, it's important to understand the difference between Zionist and Zionist Jews. The problem is over the years, the Jews have pulled the Zionist Christians and even converted some Christians to being Zionist Christians through very careful planning. And I'm going to show you how. So there's a little piece of information, like I said before, that's missing that you need to know. So now when you go to take action, I'll show you how easy it is to disseminate these things. But the fundamental thing you need to understand before we even begin going into the solution to this problem is that you have to understand you're more powerful than they are. If you do not understand that, then you will not you will continue to feel hopeless when you shouldn't be. Okay? The reason why they do everything so subversively so that you don't know what they're doing is because they exert power over you based on your ignorance. Because you're ignorant of what's happening, they're goading you into this movement and that movement, and they're never identified as the culprits. Just like how Satan will tempt you and get you to do things, but he's never the culprit because you chose to do it. It's the same way these people operate. Now, let's get into the situation that we want to deal with. But as I said before, there's an extra piece of information you need to know. And thanks to Use Yannick search engine, we're about to get into it, okay? Actually, let me start with this one. So we're going to find out how the Jewish state took over American Evangelical Church, but it wasn't even a Jewish state when it started doing this. This happened all the way back in the 1800s. There was deliberations over Zionism, and of course we know about Theodore Herzl, but there were many other people who were involved in the construction of Zionism for Jews. So even before Israel was even a state, or there was even an Israel, or even a Palestinian initiative, there were movements by these newly formed Zionists, Jewish Zionists, to now try to be persuasive, how to persuade everyone that this idea is a good idea, because it was not a popular idea in Europe. It wasn't a popular idea around the world. Most Jews rejected Zionism when it was first introduced. So let's talk about that and the plan and the strategy they used to persuade people to become Zionists. Now, very importantly, there is a clear distinction between Christian Zionists and Jewish Zionists. But there's another point that will not be said in this video that we need to go into, and that is that before there were Zionist Jews, there were Christian Zionists. I'm not talking about the free evangelicals. I'm talking about Christian Zionists. But the way how these Christian Zionists thought of Zion was still, even though they thought it was a physical place, even though they thought it was in Palestine, it still had to do first and foremost with the coming of the Son of Man, the second coming of the Son of Man. Now, so basically what we believe, what all of us believe here, which is that Jesus Christ will come, at least Christians. In all Christendom, most Christendom believes that Jesus will return with 10,000 of his saints, and then he will reside on earth for a period of time, and there'll be something called the New Jerusalem, which is known as Zion. Okay, so this is the general, when we say Christian Zionists, this is the general understanding. Now, the free evangelicals believe that to usher this in quickly, the Jews need to repatriate back into Palestine and establish an Islamic state. This is totally different to anything we've ever heard before. Even Christian Zionists were not proponents of this, okay? But this is what the free evangelicals believe, and that will hasten the coming of the second coming of Jesus Christ and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and that was caused back in 1917 after the Israelis got the promise, the mandate to go into Palestine through the Balfour Declaration. the Schofield Bible was amended to accommodate that, and that's with the free evangelicals. That's why they freely and wholeheartedly gulped that in. Okay, so now that we've covered all of that, this is important. Let's listen to the video. How did the Jewish state take over the American Free Evangelical Church? 60 million Zion Christians in the United States. Now, there's much more Zionists than that. And like I said, there are different kinds of Zionists. But the term Zionist has changed over time. It's still believed that, New Jerusalem or Zion will be established on earth. I think all of us agree with that. But the fact that the free evangelicals believe that the return will be accelerated by Israel forming a state is Schofield Bible amendments. All right, so let's get into it.
That money, every sector of U.S. society. So they targeted with that money every sector of U.S. society. They targeted congressmen, Christian clergy, editors, professors, business and labor, Jewish war veterans. They had 400 local committees. There were massive campaigns throughout the country. They also worked especially to manufacture Christian support. They secretly funded sort of Christian groups that would push the same Zionist ideology. It was an enormously successful campaign throughout the country. Even though during this time there was a great deal of opposition to Zionism by many different groups, by Christian leaders, by State Department, Pentagon, intelligence agencies, Jewish anti-Zionists, many people were opposed to it. Two of the most celebrated Christian pastors opposed it on religious and moral grounds. The Christian leaders in the Middle East had gone to the Paris peace talks to advocate on behalf of the Arab population that there should be self-determination of peoples there. One very prominent American Christian who was a Dead Sea scholar wrote a wonderful book called Palestine is Our Issue, is Our Business. To read that book, it's very strong. He talks about the right of return, about Palestinian resistance fighters, etc. But it was buried. Diplomats, the State Department, the military, the Pentagon, the intelligence agencies wrote directive after directive, study after study, memo after memo, talking about how damaging to the U.S. and to U.S. strategic interests and how in violation of American principles Zionism would be. Dean Acheson, a major statesman for many years, wrote that the Zionist agenda would imperil not only American but all Western interests in the Near East. The CIA wrote that they were pursuing objectives that would endanger the strategic interests of the Western powers in the Near and Middle East. There's so much evidence of this. Some people debate about whether the lobby is powerful. It's been powerful since the beginning.
Reasonable to meet with the constituent. I do. In fact, I'll meet with people from my district who might be in AIPAC. I just tell them you got to take your badge off before you come into my office. I'll meet with you as a constituent, but I'm not going to meet with you as a representative of a lobby for a foreign country. And most of them don't want to take me up on that deal when I say I'm not going to accept foreign lobbying in this.
Why is the Foreign Activities Registration Act not enforced against AIPAC? It's the biggest representative of foreign government in Washington, D.C.
Well, it absolutely should be. I mean, and recently I think they've tried to convict people for not being registered lobbyists of foreign countries. Now, the first explanation you will hear somebody say is, well, everybody in AIPAC is an American citizen. But that doesn't exempt you from the Foreign Agent Registration Act. If you're representing a foreign country, then, there you go. It doesn't matter what country you're a citizen of. So I think people misunderstand the act, and I think they should absolutely be subjected to that. It's registration, it's transparency, and then you could know who's the person who is on the buddy system with each member of Congress.
Anti-Semite. He came here on a student visa. He's paid by...
So they targeted with that money every sector.
Okay, so like I said before, AIPAC being registered as a foreign body is one thing. And even the Israeli lobbyists in their different capacities registered as foreign bodies is one thing. That's not going to stop the influential members of the society who have a lot of clout in the media, in the banking sector, in the movie making business, in government, because there are a lot of American Israeli dual citizenship people in government, in very high positions. And this has been going on for centuries now. So it's not going to stop them from using their influence. So what is the solution to the problem? Now, first of all, let me make it abundantly clear. These people, according to the laws of the land at present, at least AIPAC and other bodies like it, they are supposed to be registered as Mr. Thomas Massey so correctly said, under the Foreign Affairs Act, right? They're supposed to be registered as foreign bodies. This is true. So they should be registered as that, and then people should approach them accordingly. But the problem with it is their influence is so strong that even if that is the case, and even if, let's say, a president put them under executive order that way, the problem is monitoring them, holding them accountable to that, and having the delegates, the Congress people, also hold them accountable to that. Because they may register as a foreign body and still carry on business as usual with Congress. You know what I'm saying? And they just do it on the down low. They just do it on the down low. They don't do it in the open like before. And they already were on the down low, but now, you know. So that does not prevent it. Let me go further to say, again, that before AIPAC existed, before these Israeli lobbyists existed, there was already a confederation or union or a conglomerate of Jewish influential people in society and in government, which were pushing the presidents and Congress in a certain direction anyway. This is why Netanyahu was like, this is going to be easy peasy. America's going to follow whatever we say. It's not the people he was talking about. He was talking about the politicians and the history that the Jewish lobbies or the Jewish conglomerate, whatever you want to call it, the organized Jewish Zionist people had already had influence under the leadership of the United States of America multiple times. Got him into all kinds of wars. Netanyahu himself got George Bush and Company Limited to go into the Iraq War, right? So, I mean, they've had a lot of influence. You know, they had America go out. America been the go fetch guy for decades. Okay, for decades, this has been going on. So the problem is a big problem. It's not one of those small problems that you can just dismiss anytime you want in your life. You know, what is the solution to the problem is the question. So we're going to go into the solution to this problem. And to be able to understand that solution, you have to understand what you as people, what is the power you have in your hand? And this is something you can apply in any country, actually. And so I'm going to shoot out how simple it is. Again, you have to understand that you have a lot of power at your disposal. Now, again, let us just go over a couple things. The first thing that you need to go over is that income tax was a Jewish idea. And the income tax came for America to raise money to fight a war. This is how income tax came to be. They started taxing people. People wouldn't see a certain portion of their salary that went to the government, which went to fight wars. In this case, it started in World War I. So that's where income tax came from. Before that, there was no such thing as income tax. Okay, point number two, the Federal Reserve. That again came to be during World War I, where again Woodrow Wilson was conned by the Jewish bankers into forming a Federal Reserve. Okay, so this is why you fight out against the IRA, what is it called? No, is it the IRA? Whatever it's called. Okay, the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. Sorry, my bad. The IRS. IRA was a terrorist. Well, it was a place in Ireland, right? The IRS, because the IRS, which behaves like a mafia, taking your money that you earned and giving it to the government, that was formed by the Jewish community, the Zionists, the Jewish Zionists, who convinced Mr. Wilson to do this. Okay, Federal Reserve is the same thing. And you know the Federal Reserve is privately owned, and it's the Jewish banking sector which profits off of it. All right, so let's get into how do we deconstruct this stuff? How do we stop it? To stop something like this, you have to look at our campaign when it comes to Restore the Snyderverse campaign. That's the place you have to look at. How we are able to pretty much strangle Warner Brother Pictures and the Warner Brother, a big conglomerate like that. How are we bringing that conglomerate down? So let's start from the top, and I'm going to give you the organized way how it is done. And I'm going to also show you, I'm going to extend it by looking at it globally as well. So we're going to first look at it locally in the United States, or in any country you live in, any country that has democracy. The democracy, I always ask myself this question: why is it that in a democratic state, we only have two parties? There are always two parties, or you might have three, but usually prominent two. And now it makes sense, this system of governance, because this system of governance allows the people who fund in the background to manipulate everything. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, say that the monarchs that rule and reign over a country, you know, it's bad. But we just saw in a video before this that, you know, the removal of the Tsar and the murder of him in Russia, and then the removal of the premier in Germany took place and was replaced with a form of democracy, which really was owned on both sides by the Jewish bankers. So similarly, in the United States of America, this holds as well. The prominent people who control the gates of media, the prominent people who control a lot of policy in the government, the number of people in the judicial system. And you remember, this is not a majority population. This is a minority population. You find these Zionist Jews everywhere. They're also in entertainment. They basically run Hollywood. It's an unsaid thing. I remember, you know, being with Bruce Willis's brother. Bruce Willis's brother was one of my professors in university, and he made certain comments, you know, that are quite interesting. And I remember also having dealt with a friend of mine from Africa who talked about how he married a Jewish lady, or a lady who is Christian now, but she came from a Jewish family, and how, you know, he wouldn't get the blessing of her father because her father was a blatant racist. And you would think, well, Jews are racist? Well, yeah, well, we see that now. So these particular Jews are really well organized. And the point I am making is they control all these key facets of the United States and throughout the world, to be quite frank. The banking sectors that you see that are owned, you know, they usually have own home bases in Canada or wherever. That these banking sectors are usually the CEOs, and whoever owns them is usually some Jewish person. Okay. All right. So now that we've said that, how do we deal with this problem? Like with the Restore the Snyderverse movement, we have to approach it in a similar way. Are we participants of this thing? And if we are participants of this thing, where do we appear on the food chain of it? Think about it this way. If you put money in a bank, you have the rights to whatever you put, right? It's yours. Remember, the bank will use your money. You as a collective putting money in the bank is what gives the bank the capital to make its transactions, to lend out its money and make profit. So without your money, without you putting money into banks, they have no value. Even the businesses that do business with banks, which will have way more capital, even they can't keep banks afloat. The banks stay afloat because of your revenue, your money, whether it comes from your salary, goes into the bank, whatever. You have the bulk of capital that banks have. It's not the business community. This is very important. So if you want to start to destroy or erode these structures, you have to decide if you're going to participate. And if you're going to participate, they're accountable to you as a collective. You determine what happens. That's one. Two, in the entertainment industry, again, entertainment is based on you. You're the customer. If you don't pay, then what's the entertainment industry falls apart. Now there are different avenues of entertainment. We have sport, we have, like circuses and stuff like that. I guess novelty entertainment. We have film, we have theater, we have art. All of these are forms of entertainment. Music, right? But at the heads of all these entertainment industries in the United States of America, and the corporations that also, the major corporations that actually will showcase this entertainment, are Jewish people. All right? This is where they do their influence. They don't care about the actual entertainment that you consume. They don't care about that, but they control the companies that provide this entertainment. Now, you have to decide, if you're a participant in this, what is your say in this? Because you drive that industry. I want you to understand where the power comes from. You drive the banking industry, and you drive the entertainment industry. And the thing about the entertainment industry, more than any industry, is it's exclusively dependent on your participation and your money. Unlike banks, which still depend on businesses, there are banks exclusively for businesses, by the way, and then there are banks which are open to the public. The banks which are open to the public, their major revenue, believe it or not, comes from the public, comes from your salaries going in, so they get the bulk. Because of your mass, how many of you are out there? It's tremendous amounts of money the banks collect. And therefore, they're able to use these tremendous amounts of capital to lend out to businesses for a short period of time, which gives them incredible amounts of interest. So they can double, triple, quadruple the amount of money that comes into them based on these short-based loans that businesses will need. Mind you, banks need your money for capital. And if they're consistently passing into banks, this is how they're able to survive. So, as I said before, your money as a collective going into the bank, banks will go bankrupt if they don't get your money. If you choose to participate, you must make demands. You must set terms because it is your money. Now, the banks have laws and rules when you go in there, and if you accept the contract, then, X, Y, and Z. But even though those rules and legal, you should scour through the rules, by the way, and the legal stuff. But even though they have rules and legal, setups, how things should go, it's still your money that's in their bank. It's not their money that's in their bank. And therefore, as owner of that property, which is yours, you should be able to access it at any point in time, and you should be able to dictate to the organization as a collective, that is, not as individuals, but as a collective, whether you would like your money to be transferred to X or Y or Z. Let me explain what I mean. So if you find out that a bank is secretly, or at least wasn't to your attention because it's not part of the contract, is investing, for instance, or pumping money into businesses which have to do with the settlements in the West Bank, or would have to do with businesses that are providing tech for example, the monitoring and the killing of the Palestinians, or is invested in companies that are doing business with Israel, for instance, that is harming people, then there are one of two things you can do. You can either put a demand, hey, I don't want my money mixed up in the affairs of this. I don't agree with this. And you do it as a collective, and you put a mandate to the bank. Either that, or we withdraw our money from the bank. This is how you move. Okay. And that's why I said there's a lot of other things involved where you have a say, even if they have a legal framework under which your money is put through. There's always things that they are transactions and things they're doing that you may not agree with in the agreement that you propose forward. And therefore, if that's the case, withdraw your money from the banks, invest your money either in credit unions, invest your money in community fundraising, organizations. And so you'll be able to circulate it amongst the community. You'll be able to more directly with things. So banks are not the only way that money can be dealt with. Now, with respect to people who are employed, and the employer likes to make it easy, so you put it into the bank here. This is how we work. You can also go to your employer. Remember, if you are working for an employer, you're not doing that employer any favors, right? You are trading time for dollars, right? You invest your work, your hard-earned work, and you will get compensated for that. And it's up to the employer to compensate you. So if the employer is arguing with you, no, we need to put it in this bank, and you're saying, no, for X, Y, and Z reasons, I do not want my money go to that bank. You will have to make an arrangement with your employer, or your employer will end up owing you money, whichever one. They can fire you, whatever. But you have to take a stance in which you say, I am not going to trade my time for dollars, and my dollars are going to go here. I want the dollars to go here. You have to talk to your you may have to negotiate with your employer, but you should make sure that it is a zero tolerance policy for having your money mixed up with some sort of genocide somewhere, or with some sort of investment into something that has to do with trafficking of drugs or drug trafficking or whatever, some criminal activity. You don't want to have your money associated with that. You tell your employer, and then the employer has to make some sort of other alternate provisions. Okay. So I know that's, in theory, that sounds really good. But how do you move with that kind of power and authority, which employers, etc., in the fear that your employer fires you for making such demands? So how do you deal with that? I will tell you how. And this here is important. If people owe you money, you already have an advantage over them. Now, if they don't owe you any money, well, that's a totally different story. Your employer's paid you off, whatever. You'll have to use some diplomacy with your employer so you don't get fired. But you have to have a zero tolerance policy on your money going into a bank. Or if you don't want your money in a bank at all, you have to speak to your employer. And it's more powerful when you come to your employer as a collective. As individual, okay, if you go to your employer as an individual, for example, and each individual after individual says the same thing, the same narrative, well, your employer is going to get the point, okay, you guys already colluded, you spoke with each other, and you just come here, right? But numbers really matter. in a business. Okay, especially in this day and age where business can't get good employment that stays with them for a good period of time. So all of these things you have to put into perspective. But let's just say your employer fires you for that. Well, if he hasn't paid you yet, he'll have to pay you, right? And if you could now, we don't want to go into all the ramifications of carrying your employer to court for firing you for what is not agreed in the stipulated agreement that you had with your employer based on the rules of the. Okay, so there's all of that. But besides that, and of course you have corrupt courts and all that, the employer might be able to pay the court or they may do a settlement outside, whatever. The point is, you cannot be afraid to lose your job and get another job where the employer will agree to those terms. This is the important thing. I don't like banks. I've said it. I have always not liked banks. I really don't like them. But I tolerate them. But I would tell you the better solution is not to go with banks at all. The moment people move away from banks, they take away a critical part of the power of these people who have been manipulating many citizens and also the U.S. government as well. Because when you say, for example, if the U.S. government, they won't do it, but if they were to suddenly invalidate the Federal Reserve, that is to say retroactively deconstruct it, okay? And they were to say, okay, we're going to remit on income tax. We're going to stop taxing people. Income tax. Now, governments have always taxed citizens, but you're going to redact those two things. Why? Because one, the Federal Reserve does not work in the interest of the United States of America. America keeps on getting debt, and then America needs to do debt forgiveness after that happens for all the monies that were owed to the Federal Reserve, or pay off the Federal Reserve and close the chapter. One of the two. Remember, it's your tax money that's doing that. All right. And then on top of that, let's just do away with taxes. Income tax, that is. Okay, we're going to do away with income tax. People work, they buy goods and services. There's tax on goods and services that goes to government. There you go. Because before World War I, there was no such thing as income tax. Right? So this is important for people to understand. Second thing that needs to be done. So once entertainment is something that is sustained by us, only by us. Okay? So if you take a stand, I'm not supporting this anymore. I'm not supporting that anymore. I'm not paying my money into that. I'm not paying my money into that. Guess what happens? That's another place where they don't have influence over you. So you can actually completely abstain from it, or you can start setting demands. You can say, okay, well, listen, I don't like how this set of people is represented, or that set of people is represented in your entertainment, and I'm not supporting that. So this is what you're seeing today. You're seeing people selectively saying, because they become more conscious and aware, we don't like this kind of entertainment. And then they will say, this is what's up with this woke stuff and all this homosexual stuff that's going on and all of this transgender stuff that's going on. Why are you forcing this different storyline in this story? And people are not supporting that. Again, that's just showing you that the kind of influence that these people had in it's in a crisis right now, right? It's in a crisis right now. Now, the other point that is important is when people see what is happening in foreign countries, for example, in China, in Africa, where people are starting to see, oh, look, these people are being innovative. This is coming up, in China. Look at this movie. This movie's great. I like this. Now Hollywood doesn't have that monopoly and control over things like it used to. Entertainment now is becoming decentralized. We having even in the United States of America, we have Black Hollywood in Georgia. We're going to have a sort of not Hollywood, but whatever they call it in Texas, right? They're decentralizing. We have a new production companies, pushing Christian values and so on. We have smaller production companies as well, doing quite well and starting to put films that are worthwhile that people will like to go and see. And the point behind this is this. that the decentralization of things, we see the internet has kind of fostered decentralization of media. We're seeing the decentralization even of governance, that governments are realizing, the central government is very cumbersome, it's very clumsy, it's not very efficient. And so what you have is, instead of having a centralized government sort of creating policy, what should happen is the individual local governments should be formulating policy for their individual places, and the central government should provide the framework for which to, have a general something to work within the boundaries of. Like I said before, good law involves something that's inclusive to everyone. And then you have the smaller bodies or the more localized bodies sort of fine tune that to their situation, or even reject it altogether, right? So I'm trying to show you what you need to do. You need to either create demands based on your right as the person financing something to get the best value for what you have within the confines of the law constraints that you agreed to with that said body. So whether it's banks, whether it's entertainment, to which you don't really have a lot of rules for entertainment because you're the main customer. Now let's look at the other facet, governance. We just already spoke about it somewhat. The problem is that they have been able to influence the federal governments, maybe even some state legislature governments and governors and so on. They've been able to influence organizations like the church. When we talk about governance, we're talking about churches, we're talking about the way how the education system works and the ministries in the country. We're talking about the actual political government of the country. We're also talking about, in governments, we're talking about NGOs and private sector organizations and CEOs of companies. So when we look at governance now, we have to say to ourselves, how much say do we have in that? Now, if you find that we, the people, have less and less say in our governance, or the people who govern us, and that these people are not even serving us to start with, then they need to be replaced. That there's no other way to put it. You can't try to fix something that's so far gone it won't be fixed. If these people don't have allegiance to you at all, they have allegiance to their donors, then let them go off in a corner and deal with their donors. We're not going to support their donors. We're not going to support them. We need to form our own form of governance. Now, how does that happen? Just like with Restore the Snyderverse, which we have a movement, and then from that movement, there's no one leader, but there's a framework in which it operates. Similarly, that's the same thing that has to happen. The people in their local municipalities, in their local states, in their local places, need to start to somewhat, how do I put it, remove the noise of the federal government or the central government, whatever that central government is. Because most of the time, the central government is just being performative. They're just doing rhetoric. It's a lot of rhetoric. The one thing you have to be eagle-eyed on is the laws that are being passed by them. You have to look to see if the laws are good or bad. But really, by and large, they have, they have carried us to a certain distance in how the world and our countries and our given environments are seen today. We live in something called a democracy somewhat. There's somewhat freedom of speech, but of course, freedom of speech does not necessarily produce a call to action. Just because there's freedom of speech doesn't mean that things are going to happen because you're free to say whatever you want to. And there's a certain degree of freedom of speech, but it really and truly today, especially more than ever, there's a tendency by those who are in control of things, now that people are becoming more aware of the environment that they live in and the world they live in, that there's now a smothering of it. That there's an attempt by these people to try to contain the conversation and control the narrative, right? So what you're dealing with now, when we talk about a form of governance, is this. You have a choice between Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Guess what? Both of them contribute to the military-industrial complex that causes wars around the world. Take your pick, though. Which one you want, Coca-Cola, Pepsi? Right? We have Democrat and Republican. We have, in my country, we have the government and you have the opposition, right? You always have a choice. It's an illusion, ladies and gentlemen. You don't have no choice there. You have to go and pick a third thing. And you always realize the third thing is never allowed to survive, because usually the third thing reflects the will of the people, and it's true democracy. So that third thing's not allowed to thrive. And then what do? They have a perfect game. The game goes like this. I fund both sides. They're really doing my will. That's what the business sector is saying. And in the meantime, anything happens, I just blame the other side, right? I got my team Republicans. I have my team Democrats. The Democrats, they're like, the people, the labor, the unions, the rich elite people who believe in, the woke agenda. And then we have the Republican Party, which deals with mostly businesses, corporate businesses, rich, wealthy people. But then you got the poor stranglers like the MAGA and all these people who feel, white supremacy, whatever, they're over there. Right, good. So if anything happens, and the country fails to, the people in power fail to take care of the needs of the citizens, they can always blame the other side, right? The other side is responsible for that. And in case that other side comes into power and they do what they do and it still doesn't help the people, it doesn't benefit the people, they can blame the other side, right? And they just keep on blaming each other. And they play this little tag team game while they both get wealthy off of the lobbyists who fund them money, and in campaigns they get funded money, and then they have to, after you've been funded, money's not for free. They're not just doing this for free. They need their favors, right? So, you pay up how you can. So the point I'm making is they're not serving you and me. They don't care about us. And they'll pretend like they're serving you and I, especially along the election year, because they still need our votes, right? They need us to endorse them to continue robbing us. So this is what's going on. That's why I said it's better if we form our own local groups, a local community, local groups, and we self-contain ourselves through that. For example, we employ ourselves, meaning I employ people in my community. Instead of stepping out of my community to find that expertise, I employ people within my community. I inject money back into there if I'm a business person. I try to help establish businesses within my community so that the community is more or less self-contained, so that we don't have to depend on the federal government. We don't have to depend on the localized government. And then with that community there, the key to these things, and I know this one's more long-term than short-term because it's a little harder. Governance is a tricky situation. The problem with governance is this. You can't start it as you can't start governance as a what's the word I'm looking for? As a rival to the present system. You can't overtly start it as a rival to the present system. You see? Because it'll be snuffed out. Right? Because these people have immense amounts of money. But you can start it informally, and then you can start developing it in different ways. Now, you have to understand, though, that these people are going to be watching for that. If somebody becomes too influential in an area, for example, so that's why it shouldn't be just one person. You want it to be more impersonal, non-specific. You want it to be a movement more than you want it to have a leader. Because you remove the leader, everything falls apart. So you need a movement. So what you need is people who can organize things. You need people who can empower people to do things that they can already do. We need people to employ other people. We'll need people to foster entrepreneurs. We'll need people to, okay. So it's a lot more elaborate, but nonetheless, the Jews did it, right? They organized themselves and they got themselves in order. Now, so you can do it too. The thing about it is, the more you become independent from the system is the more you will become a target. Muammar Gaddafi became independent of the system and he was starting to rise. You have Maduro over there in Venezuela. He's also independent and not controlled by the system that's in place. And so he's public enemy number one. You talk about the guy in Africa, in Burkina Faso. Right now, that state is called a terrorist state, even though this guy is doing a phenomenal job there. And I can go on and on with different examples of where once you start to become independent of the system, they're going to come at you, okay? Even if you're a collective. But if you have sheer numbers, the key here is numbers. This is a numbers game. If everybody around you and everybody's doing the same thing, now the centralized governments, the federal governments, they don't have that influence and control and power that they once had. The key is not to go confronting them directly in a physical battle. It's to start your own thing and to do it and for other people to catch on. This is what China did. They didn't go head to head. Okay, they did the espionage thing, but for the most part, they developed themselves. And they were able to do it because they had sheer volume. And the way they did it was by regulating what came in and what came out, and also enforcing a policy of a one China policy, which they have with Taiwan and all these things we were talking about. And they had to take these measures. Now, you would say, well, the West will look at that and say they're dictatorial, they're dictatorship. But the people in China don't feel that way. Okay, they don't feel that way because they work collectively. They're a collective. Like they talk about Xi Jinping as if Xi Jinping is a dictator or something, and he's the only one. He's the absolute leader and the absolute. It's not like that. They have discussions. It's like Vladimir Putin. Putin has discussions with people high up in his establishment who he trusts, and they brainstorm things together. Okay, so but it's people he trusts, because you see the key is continuity. In the West, nothing continues. You get a different regime, they reverse everything that the previous regime did, and there are certain policies that continue onwards for the business sector and for those powerful oligarchs, but nothing really, so everything keeps on going worse and worse and worse because the country is not run in a way that's continuous. Whereas when you have Xi Jinping, you have all these people who they call dictators, Putin, Ping, etc. These guys are there for, a duration of time, so that there's a continuity in certain policies and so on. Anyways, that's besides the point. The point is that stability is the key to governance. You have a government that's pretty stable, pretty consistent in what it does, how it serves the people. That's the key here. It doesn't matter if it's a monarchy. It doesn't matter if you call it a dictatorship. It doesn't matter if it's a democracy. The key is having consistency. And so if you can have that embedded in the communities, that I've seen shades of that in my country, but it's not quite there yet. There's a lot, because you see, you have influx of immigrants and all of these things. And so it kind of changes the culture of the atmosphere. But if everybody can be a equal stake partner in the development, it really helps. But like I said before, this is much more of when you talk about governments, it takes a little bit more to get everything organized. And the Jews know that. They're smart enough to know that, but you see movements be successful. You see Free Palestine movement producing the ceasefire, and we're bringing tremendous awareness to the world. The BDS movement is causing a lot of frustration for companies. Recently, another company withdrew from Israel because of the BDS movement. So these movements. And why I say movements, because there's no one leader of a movement. That's the cool thing. So you can't just single out the head and snip it off, right? What they did instead is they tried to ban the movements from happening in other places. And the weirdest thing is the Jews, they use these movements. They were effective in Germany in changing the leadership of Germany because of these movements. They also did the same thing in Russia, and they did this, and they do the same thing in America. A lot of this woke stuff they're behind it. Okay, the feminism stuff, they're behind it. The Rockefellers were behind it. So all I'm saying is that they know the power of doing these movements. They know about it. And so that's what makes change effective. Movements. You don't have a particular head. You don't have any particular person leading the charge on it. You have instigators, but you don't have people who are leading the charge on it. And they're going to try and now counter these movements, as they're trying in the States with really ridiculous claims of anti-Semitism. They're trying to stop the protests, but the protests are not going to stop. People are not going to stop protesting on these things. They're not going to stop. You can't break someone who has nothing to lose. You can't break someone who is determined and has motivations other than money and career and future. When people see, when things get dire, when things get critical, people get pushed and motivated to do things they would not normally do. And when you talk about this generation of Jewish people, as well as, people in society who realize this is something I have to speak up on, and they're speaking up on it. There's really nothing that's going to deter them. You can put them in prison, you can torture them, you can put them in concentration camps. It doesn't matter to them because they're willing to risk it all to see a better future, which is threatened by the actions of a few people. And this is the critical thing. So, as I said before, the banking sector, you can shut that shit down. Okay, you can make it less relevant. And in fact, the media has, because of the internet and because of social media, the media has lost as much of its effectiveness as it used to have, right? Because people can now find information for themselves. They can find out the truth of a situation for themselves. They can see things in real time as they happen in real time, and they can see everything now. You don't need a news outlet. You don't need an intermediate medium to cover certain events. If I want to find out what's going on in Congo in real time, see it covered, I can do that. So it's sort of taken out the power that these people used to have with these different media campaigns, and now they have to do what is called propaganda campaigns, and they have to keep this propaganda campaign going on, and then they try to do what is called cancel culture, which comes from them again, cancel culture, where they try to demonize people and then cancel them, right? But it's not working because TikTok and all of these social media platforms are just mass scale showed everybody what's going on in the world. And now if you really want to find out anything about anything in the world, you can do so. And so it's decentralized the media, it's decentralized entertainment, it's decentralized governance even, because now people all over the world can make comments about all kinds of things, from corporations to governments to institutions, and they can find out the truth about anything because the information is available online. And once digital information is put online, it stays there forever. It doesn't matter what you try to do to hide it. It's there, okay? And it just takes a good hacker to bring it out. So it's a different sort of paradigm now that we're in a right paradigm where all of these structures are falling apart. All of these structures are falling down. People are finding out the truth about situations. And now you are able to take more informed action than before. And if you just keep on digging at something, you're going to meet a bunch of things. You're going to get viruses. You're going to get all kinds of things. So the people who did this homework that I'm reaping the benefits off of right now, speaking to you guys on social media, they go through a lot of stuff just to get the information to us. And so I'm grateful for that. But at the same time, you have to understand that these things, the empire is falling. So if an empire is falling apart, okay, you have to be able to see that they have to take more draconian measures to try to hold the empire together. But just as with Warner Brothers, if you persist as a group of people, as we are doing now, you're going to destroy it. You're going to see the destruction of it. It won't stand up. There are many different ways that people can save and invest their money. I always tell people the best investments you can do are investments which are tangible investments. So if you invest, for instance, you have a business, you invest in phones, cell phones, and you sell the cell phones back. That's a great investment because you can see your investment. Even better than the stock exchange, because you can see your investment and then you can get your returns on your investment. So there's a lot of things, Wall Street has power because Wall Street is looked to, and all the other stock exchanges of the world, they're looked to for the value of products and services. And then there's investment in that. And you have a choice. You can invest in, most people don't, but you can invest in the stock exchange. But once you invest and your money's in there, you need accountability for the money that's in there and how people handle your money. You have to understand, once you become an owner of something, or once you have invested some money into something, you have a say. No matter what they tell you, you have a say in how it's managed. There may be rules that you agreed to for your investment into something. But that doesn't mean you don't have a say, and you should have a say. shareholders of big companies, they have a say, and there must be accountability to them of how the company is being run. These CEOs, as powerful as you think they are accountable to the shareholders. I never forgot what Greg Silverman said so correctly, and this is entertainment again. Greg Silverman was once the president of productions for Warner Brothers Studios. Warner Brothers Studios, by the way, the Warner Brothers, who were European by name, and their name is not really Warner Brothers, but they go by Warner Brothers in the States. The Warner Brothers were Jewish people, by the way, for those of you who don't know. The head of Netflix, the corporations that own Netflix, the CEOs of those corporations are Jewish, okay? So, and then you could go through it, Universal, the whole 9 yards, CBS, whatever, Jewish. Okay. The point I'm making anyway is not that. The point I am making is that these big corporations, as big as they are, you're the boss, not them. And that sounds crazy to say, but you're the one that causes the money to pay them to keep them running. You're the one that either buys into the cable or watches their stations and the advertisements on it that they get paid by. You're the one to do it. If nobody's watching the station, it doesn't matter how many advertisements the station has. First of all, they won't advertise on the station because there's nobody to watch it. That's why they get rid of programs on stations, because if they don't have good ratings and they don't have good viewership, they get rid of them, because you're doing the whole point behind having cable or all these other things is because there's advertising, and you're advertising to people, to eyes. Okay, so let's go back through this. Governance. We're either engaging it and we have a bigger say, or we're disengaging it and we're forming our own. But as I said before, the pendulum switches towards disengaging from that and formulating your own. Just like what you do right now, people don't go to big record labels anymore. No, there's the independent label. They're the people who are pushing on their own. They're doing their own thing. Okay. So the less dependency on the centralized services and a decentralization of things actually helps to sculpt things and custom make things to better the people of different communities. Again, I'm talking collectives. I'm not talking individuals necessarily. Okay. So the solution to the problem, one, you're either engaging in banking and dictating your terms, or you're not engaging in banking altogether and you're looking for an alternative source. Two, looking at entertainment. If the I prefer this one. If the entertainment is pushing some sort of agenda, some sort of programming that you do not agree with at all, knowing now the history and knowing what these people are doing and what they're trying to get countries to do on their behalf, don't support it. So entertainment that you realize the voicing or the social voice, and it's already naturally happening, by the way, that doesn't harmonize with the humanistic values that you represent, don't support it. If you find that you think that this programming is to try and program people to behave and go in this particular direction, and you think it's a direction that's not profitable to you, then don't support it. And you can tell by the trailers and the advertisements and what's involved, you can act accordingly. So when it comes to entertainment, I am very strong on not participating in certain entertainment and supporting entertainment which will better you. Now, sports is an addictive thing. I like boxing, for example. Sports is almost like a religion. It's very addictive. So with sports and sporting events, you need to really put on your brain cap and less of your feelings and think about how the sport, you have to think politically, how the sport is either going to better you or it's wasting your time. You have to think like that. You can't go with feelings and your desire and this satisfy. I love this. No, you can't do that. Okay. Most productive people are not wasting their time just watching sports all the time. You know what I'm saying? All right. But some people make a living off of it. So I understand. I do. So there's that. And then we talked about governance. Now, governance involves, like I said, it's a sweeping thing. It is, you have the private sector, you have the government, you have the opposition, you have churches, you have leaders of group communities, so it's a big thing. It's not, it all encompasses a lot of stuff. As I said before, it's very important that either you're going to dictate terms of what people in governments are accountable to you for, and you work towards the bottom line and you campaign towards the bottom line, or you start your own system that's simpler, and it started with your local communities. You build yourself outwards, so you're not dependent on these systems and governments, particularly the big, cumbersome, very incompetent governments that we have in the world today. They're extremely incompetent, and there's a reason. It's by design. The incompetency, so that nothing will get done, so that the people actually are not taken care of, except, there's the exceptions, like, election year, then they all of a sudden, they start to ramp up things and show that they're doing something, and then they start to recall all the things they did, even though most of them don't really affect anybody on the ground, right? So look at that. If they really were good, then salaries would be raised every single year, or bi-yearly, or twice a year. Salaries would be going up based on the activity of the country, and the country would be reaping profits, right? And the people would participate in the profits of whatever the country is profiting in, right? And the what do you call it? The private sector. The private sector would actually distribute the money fairly to the employees of the private sector. So people would get little perks and stuff, and they would encourage people to work harder and do more for the companies that they're working for. But that's not what happens, right? Okay, so let's keep moving. So that was governance. Now, governance also in terms of churches. You see the movement away from the church by the people of the world. This is also an engineered thing. This is something that the churches have mocked the whole point behind, communities and community development for many, many years. And the reason is because the top of those churches are usually people who are Freemasons anyway, and they're involved in the Illuminati structure anyway. But for the people on the ground, again, like I said before, with governance, you can form your little communities, and you don't have to rely on the top heads of your church organizations and stuff as hard as you usually do, because most at the very top of these organizations, most of these people are compromised anyway. They've infiltrated the organizations, and they compromise the organizations. So I would always suggest to people, just like how you have, a person-to-person meeting with people, you may watch at these different programs, you may watch at things that your church is doing. If there's some positive things in there, you acquire them into your tool bag and you use them. I would say, though, for the most part, you want to have more informal communities where people are discussing, maybe people of the same faith, they're discussing, their faith in its purest form. Because a lot of people will tell you that a lot of churches they've moved away even from their own traditions and their own way of teaching, whether it's mosques, churches, whatever else, holy places. They seem to be moving away, skewing away from the fundamentals anyway. So since that's the case, why not informally form these organizations? The church houses and little social gatherings where people can reinforce the fundamentals that they know, because at the top, the organizations, they're doing their own thing. They're abandoning all the principles that they were founded on, and they're going in a totally different direction. And these organizations are very political, and some of these organizations have been swayed already. So it's again important for us to more be grassroots, for the people to more in dialogue with themselves, represent themselves, and interface with themselves, than just trying to rely on the big brother or a father or a mother figure of a country, taking care of them. No, people can take care of themselves, and they can run their country themselves. So when we talk about governments, that's a broad one, but this is what you can do. By doing so, you stop the state, because socialism, I'm realizing, is a good thing, but it's also an extremely dangerous thing. It's just one of many alternative forms of governance. Okay, it's dangerous when the people become dependent on the country or on the governance of the country for their needs. That's not something you should be doing. You should be self-sufficient. You should be able to depend on yourself for your needs. And if the government is trying to disrupt that, and they realize that you're becoming more independent of them, and they start arresting you or whatever they start to do, this is where the country starts to protest. And this is where, because when you start to empower yourself like that, you don't need the government, right? You don't need a central government except to make sure that laws are being enforced or laws are being maintained, and that good law is made. That's the only thing the central government's absolutely necessary for. If the judicial system's not working properly, if the governance is forming bad law, it really doesn't matter. It's still up to the people to carry on their daily lives. And really, the government's more a burden on them than it is a help to them. That's why I said it's better if you have an alternative path and instead of trying to reform our government. Because take, for instance, my country. My country, the Constitution is so old and outdated, it's not funny. They're trying to revise it. But really what they need to do is just throw that Constitution out the window and formulate a brand new Constitution. This is the best way to go forward. Or have none at all. Sounds terrible, but we're doing well enough with this bad one. We might as well just have none at all. We might be better off. But, it's just one of those things where you have to decide what it is that you as a collective are going to pursue. But it really is a pointless exercise to try to reform our government, and it's also a pointless exercise to try to replace a government with one who you think is ethnic. Because if the system is still in place, it really doesn't matter who goes in there, Okay. And the last thing that you have to decide, and again, as a collective, if you do this, you have to now hold accountable the legal fraternity, because you have, in governance, you have, the judicial arm, and then you have supposedly the arm that carries out legislature and formulates laws. The judicial arm also has to be held in account. And how this is done is through, you have to have a knowledge of the law. And then on top of that, you have to be able to, as a collective, demand that certain people be deposed from office, whether they be judicial people. And the way how this is done is very simple. You have to support investigative journalism. You have to, once the information is, then that's the beauty of the internet, right? The information can now be circulated and no one person can be identified, targeted, and killed, because journalists get killed for this, for corruption stuff. Not only journalists, but actually people in governance as well. So by circulating information through social media, people can become aware of these things. And it will force the government now to, once pressure is put upon them, it will force them to have to move a different direction. Because most of the time when governments do things, it's misdirection so they could do some evil thing on the side there and steal more money and stuff like that. So what you have to do is you have to be able to hold them account. And to do that, use social media particularly, you can expose certain things. And by exposing it and everybody being aware of that, now people can demand X, Y, and Z on this person or that person or whatever. So that's how you can go about handling that situation, particularly with the judiciary, because the judiciary is also very corrupt. A lot of these people are pedophiles that are in the judicial services. They're lesbians, homophobes, homosexuals, and pedophiles, and some of them are even bestiologists. So it's crazy, and it's really corrupt what's happening, and how different governments are corrupt, and they've been corrupt for a while worldwide, using the same model. And the people behind this whole thing have been the Zionist Jewish people who have introduced these things to these different places in some form or the other. So when you start to take away that power from all of these institutions, because remember, it's the people that put them in power. Even if it's the people that nominate the politicians who nominate the judicial people who are best recommended or whatever, nominate the president or whatever, it's still the people that put the regimes in place to put these people in place. So you endorse them. So if you don't want to endorse anybody in an election, you're done with that, then you need to proceed in a different direction. And that's all I'm saying. You either engage in the system, and if you engage in the system, you should have certain stakes in the system. It's not just you have a stake at a certain time every year or every 4 years or every 5 years or 8 years, whatever it is, when elections come. No, you have a stake even in the interim periods between that, you should be able to have the power in the state to force elections if necessary, and so on and so on. So you have to understand your powers and rights as a collective, and then you need to act on them. Like I said before, you have the avenues are government, education, finance, the banking sector, right? And the banking sector and the corporations, right? So you have to be able to look at these things and decide if what's your stake in it, what demands you can make, and if those demands are not being met, then you have to look at an alternative solution to the problem, which means more looking towards your communities, the people in your communities, starting to formulate things there, starting to interface with people in your communities in your localized area to make sure that things do happen in your localized area. So that's how you start to combat that. And that goes for any country of the world. Now, the thing about it is, and yes, different countries have different cultures, and therefore certain countries will demand of their citizens certain things, okay? Because different countries have different cultures, different countries have different ways how they are governed, okay? But the bottom line is, if you're not reaping benefits, of your country or your place, and you find that things are getting worse and worse in your country or place, then it means you have to take the power back into your hands. And this is what I'm telling you. This is what you need to do to combat these things. The less reliance you have on these things, the less reliance you have on these things, is the less power you're giving to the people who oversee these things. And the less power you give them, is the less relevant they will be. The less relevant they be is the more easily replaced they are. And that's how you take away the power from them, right? So that's what we're doing in the Restore the Snyderverse movement, and that's why, whether you call it boycott campaigns or whatever, that's why we're so successful. And we're sort of bringing down a number, and then the external factors, the foreign factors. Now, I said that's the localized thing, but we can talk globally in terms of liaising with other people in other countries, seeing how they operate and how they do things, and building alliances with different localized groups in different countries. And therefore, we could even do a global response to something. This is what you're seeing with the school students in the campuses globally around the world, the protests globally around the world. But we can also take action globally around the world doing certain things. You know, we see the BDS movement globally around the world being enacted. And similarly, we can do the same thing, because the more we go global is the more of us we have. The more global a movement is, the more people involved. So that's the idea behind it. And therefore, we can have solidarity with different people from different places who may be going through the similar things that we have, because it's a similar thing globally, worldwide right now. We have a problem. And the people who are causing these problems and instigating these problems are very much aware of what they're doing. Okay, so it's very important for us to organize like that and to have a collective voice. And these things that happen actually help us to become stronger, help us to have more communication with each other, help us to have much more of a collective voice that is necessary. So this is how you combat these things. And use every tool at your disposal. And remember, the beautiful thing about social media is, even if you get banned from one platform, you can go to another platform, or another platform, another platform. You can find a platform still to this day to express your views, and then you can bring everybody to that platform. So that's the cool thing, the fluid thing about social media. We have a lot of advantages still in front of us. Yes, there's the monitoring of us by Big Brother globally through satellites and otherwise, but ultimately in the end, this is still very, very doable and very, very winnable because of our shared numbers. When they start to do massive genocides, or they have a world war where nuclear weapons are used and it wipes out a good substantial portion of the population, as well as makes ill and sick a substantial portion of the population, that is when now we have a little bit more problems. But even then, I think people will resist And that's good. Anyways, that's what I have for you guys. Hold on. Let me just share with you this.
Majority of Christianity believes thoroughly that this new political military state of Israel is indeed the fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham. But they haven't got the slightest clue what's really going on here. The whole violent invasion into the land of Palestine, where Muslims and Christians and Jews had been living peacefully together for thousands of years, is based on a misunderstanding of the promise that God made to Abraham in the Old Testament. God told Abraham that he would receive land, that a great people would come forth from him. But one of the experts of the Jewish religion, who later became the Apostle Paul, wrote to the Jews in his time, who were called the Hebrews, that Abraham essentially was not promised and was not looking for a stretch of desert. He was looking for a heavenly land built by the hand of God, something far more beautiful, far more profound, far more glorious. This was confirmed by Jesus Christ, who was the Messiah and who came to fulfill all the promises of God to Abraham and to his descendants. But he surprised everybody by saying, "My kingdom is not of this world." He said, "My kingdom is not visible with the human eye. My kingdom," he said, "doesn't work with weapons. It doesn't wage war." He said, "My kingdom is not on a geographical location on earth." He said, "My kingdom is a heavenly realm. And you can only see it through the Spirit of God. You can only enter it when you are born from above by the Spirit." And he said, "My kingdom is among you. It is inside of you." So God is not interested in a political military nation that wages war and kills people. Jesus Christ is called the Prince of Peace. He's the one who removes all hatred and violence between people and who makes people brothers. That's why in the New Testament it says, in Christ there is neither Jew nor Gentile. There is no more hostility or division. There is one new man, one new creation in Christ. Those who accept Christ, they are the ones who can enter into this kingdom of God. It has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with military warfare. It has nothing to do with hatred between one people group and another people group. That is in fact the exact opposite of this. But we've all been told something entirely different. We've been told by the Rothschilds through the C.I. Scofield Study Bible, which has spread all around the world and which was unquestioningly accepted by all of Christianity, that it is all about a political military nation, which is the opposite of what Christ said. He said, even to the Samaritan women at the well, for those who know what Scripture say, he said, the time is gone, the time is over, where people worship God in the city of Jerusalem. He said, now the true worshippers will worship God in spirit, because God is a spirit, and that's the worship that he longs for. And then the Apostle Paul explained to the Galatians, he said, guys, understand this. You guys are not children from the earthly Jerusalem. You are not children from something worldly. You are children, you come forth from the heavenly Jerusalem. The heavenly Jerusalem is your mother. It's a heavenly kingdom, Jesus Christ said. In the Old Covenant, there was a physical Israel, a physical Jerusalem, a stone temple. But in 70 AD, that was all destroyed. That was judged by the Almighty God. And then in the New Testament, it says that we are now the temple of the living God. He dwells in us. We are his dwelling place, and his spirit builds us as homes where God can dwell. And through us, he brings healing and deliverance to the world. So we have two completely opposite mindsets. In the time of Jesus, the Jews wanted a political and military kingdom. That's why the apostles joined Christ. That's why Jude, who betrayed Christ, followed him. He expected Christ to restore Israel in a military, political way. And when Jesus didn't do that, and when it was clear that he was going to be killed by the Jews, then Jude betrayed him. He thought, this guy is not going to restore a political military Israel. He's in no way anything that I thought he would be. He's not going to be our world leader who will bring peace over all of humanity from Israel. So Jude betrayed him, and that caused Christ to be murdered. The apostles also left Christ. They were disillusioned. But when the Spirit of God came on Pentecost, all the Christians suddenly began to understand, starting with the apostles, what Christ had been explaining to them. This is not about a political military land. This is about a heavenly land. This is about the reign of the Most High God in your heart, where you are transformed on the inside, where heaven comes to dwell in your heart. And you become a completely different person, not through a religion, not through something political or social or military or whatever, but by becoming a child. Christ said, if you become like a little child, you can enter into the kingdom of heaven. So the promises that God had made to Abraham and his descendants were fulfilled in Christ. God never spoke about a stretch of desert that would be his ultimate fulfillment. He had something far more beautiful, far more glorious. He had a heavenly kingdom, a heavenly nation, people all around the world who love God. And here we come to an incredible misunderstanding concerning what it means to be a Jew or an Israelite or a descendant of Abraham. Who was Abraham? What is a real Jew? Listen carefully. Even if you're not a Christian, even if you're not religious in any way, this is extremely interesting and fascinating, and it explains the core of what's going on in Israel and the agenda for world domination. So this relates to all of us, no matter our background and beliefs. So please keep watching, because a lot more will be revealed. Abraham was somebody who was faithful to the creator of life. He did not join into the demon worship and the human sacrifice and all the sorcery and magic of his surroundings. He remained faithful to the creator of all life. That's why God revealed himself to Abraham and said, Abraham, you will be the father of all the people throughout all of history who will be just like you. They will walk in your footsteps in a way that they will also love me despite evil surroundings in their culture. They will be faithful to me despite perversion and wickedness in their nation. He said, a great people will come forth from you, and they will come from every tribe, every tongue, every nation. And this will be called Israel. Israel means Prince of God, or in other words, royal child of the creator of heaven and earth. So Israel was never meant to be a political nation. It was that for a short period to show that that doesn't work out, because the people of Israel who came after Abraham, they left the creator. They turned back to darkness, and they went back to worshiping demons and human sacrifice. You can read that all throughout the scriptures. And God kept sending his prophets to call them back to him, but they always rejected and even murdered them. So God showed a political nation is not my idea. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about physical seed. I'm talking about spiritual seed. I'm talking about people who are circumcised in their heart, who walk with me in the midst of darkness, who are faithful to me, surrounded by wickedness, who walk in faith, even though their eyes can't see and their mind can't understand. They keep trusting me. That is what it means to be the seed of Abraham. We are like him. We walk like him. We live like him. We walk in his footsteps. And that's why the prophet Isaiah and the apostle Paul clearly said that only a very small portion of ancient Israel was truly Israel. Only those who were truly faithful to God. The vast majority of ancient Israel turned their back to things.
I'm going to say something super controversial, and maybe people are going to think I'm an idiot, but I don't think Jeffrey Epstein's dead.
I don't know that he is either.
Think about it. You're telling me that the most powerful man at the time that fooled colleges, fooled the most powerful people, had an island, had tapes, and he was with the most influential people in the world. You think he didn't prepare to get locked up? You don't think that he was in his ring? He goes, 15 minutes, every minute that I'm not got out of here, I'm going to release somebody from Australia is going to send something. Somebody from London is going to send something. They don't have footage of somebody killing him, but they have footage of them removing his body.
Yeah.
That dude is probably watching this podcast being like, I knew somebody would figure it out.
It wasn't like the camera was dead or the camera wasn't there. Like,
The
come
whole
on.
thing was so sketchball. Like the cameras weren't working. The two guards who were supposed to be there all night just happened to take a break during that time. Or it's so.
He has a
sus-
submarine.
It's so suspect.
I'm Israeli Jewish, American as well. My partner is Palestinian, and I can do things that he can't do. I can travel freely, and even though his mother is a refugee from what is now Israel, he can't pass areas that are off limits to Palestinians. I have excellent rights. I have health. There are cities in Israel being built for Jews only, and also in the West Bank, settlements being built for Israeli Jews only, while Palestinians are hemmed in, unable to build cities, and their homes are being demolished. Lack of permits that are almost impossible to get. The Israeli authorities are engaging in forcible transfer, where they remove Palestinian communities in the West Bank to make room for settlements. All of these are part of the root causes of the violence. There's terrible abuses going on. You just have to listen to what people on the ground are telling you and adjust accordingly.
It's all our fault.
It's not all our fault, but when Epstein and Diddy both, those were blackmail rings. That's literally what was going on.
100%.
They were videoing everybody getting incriminating evidence on people so that they could then hold them hostage in doing various things.
I'm going to say something super controversial, and maybe people are going to think I'm an idiot, but I don't think Jeffrey Epstein's dead.
I don't know that he is either.
Think about it. You're telling me that the most powerful man at that time that fooled colleges, fooled the
Israel as the center of a one world government. In order to accomplish their goal, they, however, had to do one very important thing. They needed the support of the worldwide group.
Okay, so I hope that education was good. While that was going on, I was taking a 5 because I'm kind of tired. But yeah, that is basically my rundown. So you guys know what you're supposed to do. And in order to get it done, what you guys just got to do is rely on each other. I told you, you have the power to be able to do these things. It's up to you to make the decision and make the choice to do them. I'll catch you guys later. I am Christ, I am disciple. And yeah, you all just saw Zachary Levy talking about Epstein and Diddy. Diddy, CIA, Epstein was Mossad. That's why they both went down together. But I can tell you right now, man, they're the tip of the iceberg. It gets more gross than that. But this is what I got for you guys. You also heard a Israeli lady, Jewish lady, speaking about a Palestinian husband that she has, and he can't go where he needs to go. She can go anywhere. He can't. So, yeah, that's what I got for you guys. I'm going to catch you guys later. That's the solutions to the problems.